Test that the official public health advice will make that adults and children testing positive for the virus stay at home for 5 days. And patients with sickle cell disease have begun receiving treatment for the blood disorder in over 20 years. NHS England hopes to treat up to 5,000 patients over the next 2 years with a monthly contribution of £3 million. Thank you, Tom. It is now 8:10 in London, 10:10 here in Kiev, in Ukraine. When I woke this morning around 4 hours ago, I woke in a city, in a country under attack. Ukraine, a democratic country, a European country, a country just a couple of hours flight time from London, is being invaded. It is now clear from the north, from the south, from the east. Vladimir Putin justified his decision to defy international law, to ignore all pleas for restraint, with wild claims that he's demilitarizing and denazifying Ukraine, completing the mission, he claimed, of another generation. We will speak in a moment to a former Prime Minister of this country, to a former Deputy Supreme Commander of NATO in Europe, and also to a Foreign Office Minister. Let's begin, though, with the latest news from our Chief International Correspondent, who joins me here overlooking a city, Kiev, which came under attack just a few hours ago.
Yes, it's an astonishing moment in history, really turning a page in history that this has happened in our time. And there's a sense of disbelief and a real sense of danger here, Nick, in Kiev and right across this country. We're now hearing that the roads out of the capital, Kiev, where we are now, are jammed as people try to leave. We were reporting earlier about there were queues at the supermarket, queues at the ATMs, queues at the petrol station, people carrying those.
Well, I've heard all that before, but I was listening to the news since 7. And what was most notable of the reporting on BBC Radio 4 on the Today programme was references to a war. First they said it would be the worst war since the beginning of the century, and I thought, okay, that's a kind of very specific to our times. And then as the hour progressed, it became the worst war since 1945. So they couldn't even agree on the rhetoric to be used. Now, those of us who have bothered understanding the situation, who bothered to read the New York Post, to read between the lines, is that what is it to do with? Is it really the Russians starting it? Will anybody? Well, I don't suppose enough people will actually read up about the history of the Ukraine, but they might just have an idea that it was, well, not exactly an independent country. And if we dislike Russia because of the Russian Revolution, we should know that the Ukraine featured in the Russian Revolution. And something was done about the Ukraine for one reason or another, and we know it's one of those disputed territories like Xinjiang in China, or, well, Northern Ireland in Britain. Disputed territories, The Americans have the benefit of the Monroe Doctrine. Well, they don't need to talk about it much now since it's historic, now that they have a global empire. But the Monroe Doctrine in the 1800s, I think it was 1834, was about keeping out European powers, saying, don't you come to South America and tell people there what to do, because it's our backyard, so back off. I can look that up for you. Feel free to have a look at Felix Rex, who's gone live. But we can talk through it here. I don't. You might know more about foreign policy than me, but basically, this is all about dealing with sickening Western propaganda, treating us as idiots, and most of us are because we can't be bothered to look up the history of the Ukraine from a non media source, or even read the translation of Putin's speech. I think it was 90 minutes, so that was quite a lot of it, but it does give you the history of the Ukraine from a Russian standpoint, and it is necessary if you want to understand the situation to know how the Russians think of it. So what was I doing? I was going to look up the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine was a United States foreign policy position that opposed European colonialism in the Western Hemisphere. It held that any intervention in the political affairs of the Americas by foreign powers was potentially a hostile act in the US. The doctrine was central to US foreign policy for much of the 19th and early 20th century. President James Monroe first articulated the doctrine in December 2nd, 1823, during his 7th annual State of the Union address to Congress, though it would not be named after him until 1850. Yeah, 1850. At the time, nearly all Spanish colonies in the Americas had either achieved or were close to independence. Monroe asserted that the New World and the Old World were to remain separate spheres of influence. Thus, further efforts by European powers to control or influence sovereign states in the region would be viewed as a threat to US security. In turn, the US would recognize and not interfere with existing European colonies nor meddle in the affairs of European countries. By the end of the 19th century, Monroe's declaration was seen as a defining moment in the foreign policy of the United States and one of its longest standing tenets. The intent and effect of the doctrine persisted for over a century with only small variations and would be invoked by many US statesmen and several US presidents, including Ulysses S. Grant, Theodore Roosevelt, John F. Kennedy, and Ronald Reagan. After 1898, the Monroe Doctrine was reinterpreted by Latin American lawyers and intellectuals as promoting multilateralism and non-interventionism. In 1933, under President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the US affirmed this new interpretation, namely through the co-founding of the Organization of American States. Into the 21st century, the doctrine continues to be variably denounced, reinstated, or reinterpreted. Yes, it means whatever you want it to mean. So, hello, Shaggy Bro. Did you want to talk about that? I know, somebody yesterday said he wanted to come on. I had a brief look at one of your videos. Tangle of wires. It would be good to talk it over with an American. So, what is this really about? As far as the people of the West are concerned. So, we are warned on the radio that we should expect, well, everything to change now. So really, the Ukrainian crisis, the manufactured Ukrainian crisis, is a stick to beat Western citizens with, to say, well, everything's changed now because of Russia. If prices are high, well, it's because of Russia. And I suppose any European citizen saying, but well, we didn't have to make a fuss about Russia moving around in its own backyard. Well, European leaders didn't have to slavishly do exactly what the US told them, which is to be mean about Russia. But I suppose that would be interpreted as, well, being disloyal or being a Russian shill or something. So this is where things are heading. Very sad. To think that there is no single European leader prepared to stand up to America when America is so far away and has no regional interests at all to defend. America is, after all, self-sufficient in energy, but Europe is not. And European leaders have been induced to act against their own national and continental interests by starting a war or a very tense situation over Russia. Why are they so stupid? Because I would say it is because of the corrupt and demented system that is democracy. What is a problem with democracy? Because it is unaccountable. It pretends to be about the people, but really, of course, the political classes will control what is being said and done to the people in the name of the people. If that is the case, then we might as well have the national policy of promoting the national interest rather than promoting the interests of liberalism or democracy or some such nonsense, because, well, liberalism isn't even properly defined. We don't know what the principles of liberalism are, nor do we know what the principles of democracy are. The people will tell you that they haven't been getting what they've wanted for a long, long time, so long that they have given up on it. But if you narrow down the bone of contention to the national interest, then people can very easily ask politicians and hold them to account as to why they think starting a war in the Ukraine or being mean to Russia is in any way in the, well, German national interest, in the British national interest. They could at least frame their question in a way that is sensible. And because they have been prevented from using these tools of thinking, they are not even able to formulate the proper question. I see the Americans are, well, sleeping, I suppose, while Europe is starting a war. I don't suppose anything much will happen, but it will have the effect of chilling discussion in Europe, saying we mustn't say this, and if you say anything pro-Russian, you're a Russian shill. So the only way we can push back on this is to ask ourselves, what is in the national interest of our particular country? And ask our leaders what they think they're doing. That is the only way to frame the debate. A lot of these problems are really problems of asking the right question. And most people don't know how to do that. I suppose today will be a day of panic buying and buying of gold. It's very sad, really. The other day, Stephen J. James was inclined to believe government propaganda about Russia. I mean, I just go for the one that makes the most sense. And the one that makes the most sense would be the most reliable one, even if it is against the official version, because, well, we know what the government is like, because we know what our politicians are like, don't we? All right, I have nothing more to say other than point out that the situation, the manufactured crisis in the Ukraine, will be used against the citizens of Western nations as an excuse to clamp down on our free speech, as a reason for worsening conditions of the economy. And our politicians are going to be blaming Russia and using that as an excuse to, well, make everything worse and have even more stupid, crazy rules. Well, today it has crossed a line, and we should ask ourselves what our leaders think they're doing. They're certainly not serving the national interest. And we should listen to the discussion between me and Diana yesterday. I think she's an intelligent lady, but she didn't really make much sense in that she knows that Nord Stream 2 was built at the behest of Angela Merkel. She was the one who asked the Russians to build it. This is not mentioned in any of the reports. In fact, it's not mentioned at all now. It's Russia that started it. It's Russia that's been moving into the newly recognized Russian majority, newly established republics in the Ukraine. So I hope as a result of listening to this channel, you will be at least inclined to check out other sources and receive unfiltered the official version. Gottit hasn't realised that the Cold War is over. got it all. Don't I realise Ukraine is a democratic country? Well, I think it's a sign of dementia, actually. I think that's a sign of dementia rather than those are the good guys kind of thing. Hysterical postings by got it, but then we should expect people who have no name with an anonymous avatar to post crazy war hysteria. So what's the pipeline here from the US and Canada about? Why has it become a political football? Is it because certain energy interests don't want the pipeline to compete against them? The fracking people don't like it, right? Something like that. Why don't you tell us? Effluent for you. I wouldn't mind hearing from an ordinary person who isn't a political anorak about these things. Yes, effluent for you confirms it's all about, using the environment as a result, as an excuse not to do the sensible thing. I suppose you're all at Felix Rex, who is live now about the situation. Perhaps I'll go there too. But let us think what Western leaders should be doing. Not forget America, because America is like a belligerent drunk. But you would have thought Germany would have done the opposite. And if there's one person I really want to interview in the whole of the Western world, it would be Angela Merkel. And she hasn't even got a Twitter account. I suppose she's retired. She's properly retired. Let's see if I can find anything about her on Google. She's probably been told to shut up too, right? Because there was a time when she realized that the CIA was spying on her and she kicked them out. Yeah. No, I'm reminded of this incident when she was in some meeting and it was George Bush and he tried to give her a shoulder massage and she just kind of, used very aggressive body language to tell him to fuck off. It was practically a jiu-jitsu move or something. It would have been fun if she actually threw him over her shoulder because she was so angry at the Americans. Okay, so 10 days ago, she appeared in a magazine, and then there's a new report about her, so we're going to look at that. First public appearance on the 13th of February. It doesn't say very much. She chose not to attend a Christian Democratic Union virtual party conference and also skipped the meeting of the local constituency that elected her. Merkel also turned down a job offer to work for the United Nations as the chair of an advisory body on global public goods. And it's believed that Merkel helped Steinmeier, her foreign minister at the time, to his first term as Germany's head of state in 20. Okay, that's old news. All right, forget that. We were going to go for. She's made. Daily Express reported 13 hours ago. It's just saying it would be if she came back, kind of thing. So they want her to come back and be mean about Putin. And they want her to walk back on it. And I guess the Americans say, come back, Merkel, and say something mean about Putin because you were so friendly with him before. But it hasn't happened yet. Okay, so the Express is a halfway sensible paper because it was a campaign for leave, and the last paragraph of the report says, considering the pipeline could have heated 26 million German homes at an affordable price, it seems to be in Berlin's best interest to diffuse tensions, avoid war, and get back the chance to use more of Russia's gas. So back to my discussion with Diana yesterday. She seemed a bit confused, didn't she? She's saying, oh, blah, 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 blah. But the Americans. And I said, well, rather rudely, screw the Americans. It's the Germans who need the energy, low energy prices. And it just didn't seem to register with her. It's the Americans. We have to submit to the Americans. And I thought, no, why? All the European nations, all the leaders of the European nations, if only they were thinking right and acting in the European European regional interest and in their own national interest, they would have done the right thing. They would have said, well, more cheap energy from Russia, please, and if America doesn't like it, it can take a running jump. And maybe, America, you should, well, have your head examined. Yeah, got it. Who are you? What do you want? Just this mindless hatred for, the commies, who are gone. You don't know that the commies are gone? You think Russia should be surrounded by NATO, encircled, and not complain? Yeah. Merkel doesn't like hugs from creeps. You don't have to be European to to be able to work out what is or isn't in the interests of the Europeans. It doesn't matter about the European army. Why, there's no danger of being invaded by Russia. Well, you can start organizing the European army, but, well, why? Russia has no intention of invading, so it has never had a history of invading. It's stupid Cold War propaganda exercise to frighten the Europeans into cucking to the Americans and joining NATO. And now the Americans themselves don't want their global empire. They want their government to be looking after their interests, because they have problems too. They have their own problems of rising inflation and rising crime and immigration. I'm sure the American people want their government to be looking after them rather than starting another world war, right? So please go back to my discussion with Diana yesterday. She joins in the second half, and she didn't really make that much sense, and she's a lady that likes to consider herself particularly well informed about these matters. Effluent for you says, China invades by seduction. I suppose you mean by trade. Why would Russia not have its methods of invasion? Well, you can't really call Nord Stream 2 a Russian invasion if it was asked for by Merkel. Okay, before I go, I really think I should more closely analyze the reporting from the Express. So listen, well, examine carefully the kind of language used. Would, right? Merkel's game-changing comeback would show Putin cannot get away with murder. Game-changing in quotes, get away with murder in quotes. Angela Merkel's return to politics would be a, quote, game changer, unquote, in the Russian conflict with the West, her biographer has claimed. Claimed. A hint of skepticism. Lots has changed in Europe since Ms. Merkel's departure from power last December. In Ukraine, security is at risk. Its neighbouring countries wonder how a full-scale invasion of Kiev would impact them. And in Germany, the ambitious Nord Stream 2 project has just been frozen. Professor Matt Quattrup, author of Angela Merkel, Europe's most influential leader, said if the former German Chancellor came in, quote, as a mediator, unquote, Vladimir Putin would feel respected, which, according to the political scientists, is at the heart of what the Russian president is looking for. Yeah, he would, because, well, he's friendly with her. In a televised address to the nation on Monday, Mr. Putin announced the recognition of rebel-held Donetsk and Lugansk in eastern Ukraine as independent entities. Rebel-held in Donetsk and Lugansk means that those people there are Russian, they're majority Russian, and they don't want to be ruled by the Western Ukrainians, shall we say, the ones who want to join the EU. And we have to remember that Ukraine has been divided in many different ways over the last, I guess, 150 years or so. After his lengthy speech, in which he claimed modern Ukraine was entirely created by Russia, he ordered troops into the two breakaway regions. Yes. Well, I mean, who else would have created modern Ukraine, considering there was, it was something that the Russian revolutionaries in 1917 had to deal with. In doing so, although Mr. Putin tried to justify the move by saying the Kremlin's forces were going to act as peacekeepers, he disregarded Moscow's commitments under the Minsk Agreement, a peace deal for which Ms. Merkel is largely to credit. Struck in 2015, it was a result of the 2014 seizure by Crimea by the Kremlin. Professor Kortrup from Coventry University argued Merkel was the one who negotiated a kind of truce. In a bid to secure a ceasefire between Ukrainian government forces and Russian-backed separatists in the Donbas region following the annexation of the Black Sea Peninsula, i.e. Crimea, Germany and France scrambled to negotiate with Mr. Putin. François Hollande was in office in France at the time, but Ms. Merkel, a Russian speaker, was the go-to figure for the Kremlin, Professor Kortrup told the Express. He added, she was also the one who was instrumental in getting Russia kicked out of G8, which then became G7. She was the one who spearheaded the sanctions back then. So it is not as if she is very friendly with Russia, but she is very respected, probably because she was tough before. But that toughness, he suggested, is the key to Ms. Merkel's leverage over Mr. Putin. So Russia, has lost a lot of territory. If you look at the map and see this region called Belarus, that's an independent country now. It used to be part of the Soviet Union, and then the Ukraine, which is very important because of its coast that gives Russia access to the Black Sea, right? Although from the Russian coastline, it also has access to the Black Sea. So these territories in the east of Ukraine, Lugansk and Donetsk, will be Russian majority parts who don't want to be ruled by the Ukrainians, the new government in the Ukraine that was installed after the Color Revolution. And obviously, Russia would feel the duty to protect its Russian peoples, the Russian people there. Let's remember the Crimean War again. What was that about? I made it up the other day, but it's so complicated that I've forgotten. I know something about Russia wanting a warm water port. The Crimean War was a military conflict which fought in 1853 to 1856, in which Russia lost to an alliance of France, the Ottoman Empire, the UK, and Piedmont, Sardinia. So France, Britain, and Turkey, and Italy ganged up against Russia. The immediate cause of the war involved the rights of Christian minorities in Palestine, which was part of the Ottoman Empire. The French promoted the rights of the Roman Catholics, and Russia promoted those of the Eastern Orthodox Church. Longer-term causes involve the decline of the Ottoman Empire, the expansion of the Russian Empire and the preceding Russo-Turkish Wars, and the British and French preference to preserve the Ottoman Empire to maintain the balance of power in the concert of Europe. It has widely been noted that the causes in one case involving an argument over a key had never revealed a greater confusion of purpose, but led to a war that stood out for its notoriously incompetent international butchery. So it was really a war that was instigated. Okay, let me just read a bit more of it. The churches worked out their differences with the Ottomans and came to an agreement, but both French Emperor Napoleon III and Russian Emperor Nicholas I refused to back down. Nicholas issued an ultimatum that demanded that the Orthodox subjects of the Ottoman Empire be placed under his protection. Britain attempted to mediate and arranged a compromise to which Nicholas agreed. When the Ottomans demanded changes to the agreement, Nicholas recanted and prepared for war. In July 1853, the Russian troops occupied the Danubian principalities, now part of Romania, but under Ottoman suzerainty. In October 1853, having obtained promises of support from France and Britain, the Ottomans declared war on Russia. Led by Omar Pasha, the Ottomans fought a strong defensive campaign and supported the Russian advance at Silistra, now in Bulgaria. You see how complicated it's getting? So the Turks got into Bulgaria. A separate action in the fort town of Kars in western Armenia led to a siege, and an Ottoman attempt to reinforce a garrison was destroyed by a Russian fleet at the Battle of Sinop in 1853. Fearing an Ottoman collapse, the French and British had their fleets enter the Black Sea in 1854. They moved north to Varna in 1854 in June and arrived just in time for the Russians to abandon Silistra. Silistra is in Bulgaria. Aside from a minor skirmish at Konstanz, now Constanta, there was little for the Allies to do. Frustrated by the wasted effort and by demands for action from their citizens, the Allied commanders decided to attack Russia's main naval base in the Black Sea, Sebastopol, on the Crimean Peninsula. So there were all these foreign troops, well, British and the French and the Italians. They said, well, while we're here and we're soldiers, let's attack something. So we'll attack the Russian naval base in Sebastopol. After extended preparations, Allied forces landed on the peninsula in September 1854 and marched. So we have to remember that Crimea belonged to Russia. And they had a naval base right there, which is what the French and the British and the Italians attacked, right? So the Russians had been there so long that they had a naval base there, which the Allies attacked. Allied forces landed on the peninsula in 1854 and marched their way to a point south of Sebastopol after they had won the Battle of Alma on 20th September 1854. The Russians counterattacked on 25th October in what became the Battle of Balaclava, and that's the one that Tennyson wrote about and were repulsed. But the British Army's forces were seriously depleted as a result. A second Russian counterattack at Inkerman, November 1854, ended in stalemate as well. The front settled into the siege of Sevastopol, involving brutal conditions for troops on both sides. Smaller military actions took place in the Baltic, the Caucasus, and the White Sea, and the North Pacific. Okay, we don't need to know about that, but we need to remember that the Crimea was Russian. All right, was Russian. It was certainly Russian in 1854, so Russian that the Russians had a naval base there, which the Allies attacked. Hold on to that fact, please. Sevastopol finally fell after 11 months after the French assaulted Fort Malakoff. Isolated and facing a bleak prospect of invasion by the West if the war continued, Russia sued for peace in March 1856. France and Britain welcomed that development as the conflict was growing unpopular at home. You bet it was getting unpopular at home. Can you imagine being a soldier? Well, a British one. Well, anyone really wondering, what the hell was it all about? Why are we here? Why are we getting killed? For what exactly? And how are you going to explain it to them? You're going to explain the finer points of foreign policy to them? Oh, we're doing it because we just want to annoy Russia. Or, we wanted to help the helpless Christian peoples in the Ottoman Empire. And the answer is that they already came to an agreement. The churches worked out their differences with the Ottomans and came to an agreement. So they can't even explain it. So it was the French making trouble, sending an ultimatum to Turkey. Oh, okay. So basically they were just looking for an excuse for a fight. The Treaty of Paris, signed on 30th March 1856, ended the war. It forbade Russia from basing warships in the Black Sea. The Ottoman vassal states of Wallachia and Moldavia became largely independent. So Russia lost its influence on the vassal states. Christians there gained a degree of official equality, and the Orthodox Church regained control of the Christian churches in dispute. The Crimean War was one of the first conflicts in which military forces used modern technology such as explosive naval shells, railways, and telegraphs. The war was one of the first to be documented extensively in written reports and in photographs. As the legend of the charge of the Light Brigade demonstrates, the war quickly became a symbol of logistical, medical, and tactical failures and of mismanagement. The reaction in Britain led to a demand for professionalisation, most famously achieved by Florence Nightingale, who gained worldwide attention for pioneering modern nursing while she treated the wounded. The Crimean War marked a turning point of the Russian Empire. The war weakened the Imperial Russian Army, drained the treasury, and undermined Russia's influence in Europe. The empire would take decades to recover. Russia's humiliation forced its educated elite to identify its problems and to recognize the need for fundamental reforms. They saw rapid modernization as the sole way to recover the empire's status as a European power. The war thus became a catalyst for reforms of Russia's social institutions, including the abolition of serfdom and overhauls in the justice system, local self-government and education, and military service. So let's go back a bit more about the Crimea. The Crimean Peninsula. So it's mostly made up of ethnic Russians with significant Ukrainian and Crimean Tatar minorities. So you can understand that it would be of enormous strategic significance to the Russians. And of course, the Russians weren't going to let the Ukrainians have it. And of course, Western powers shouldn't be interfering with Russia, particularly the Europeans who would want peace and cheaper energy prices, wouldn't they? So when did the Crimea become part of the Russian Empire? In 1783, as a result of the Russo-Turkish Wars. Following the Russian Revolution of 1917, Russia became an autonomous republic within the Russian SFSR, Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, in the Soviet Union. So, so before that, I guess it was Turkish. So the status of Crimea is disputed, as you would expect. So before the Russians controlled it, it was controlled by the Crimean Khanate. I've never heard of it. The Crimean Khanate, officially the Great Horde of the Deshti Kipchak, and in old European historiography and geography known as Little Tartary, was a Crimean Tatar state existing from 1441 to 1783, the longest lived of the Turkic Khanates that succeeded the empire of the Golden Horde. So it was a Mongol and later Turkicized Khanate. Yeah, well, disputed territory. I see that Dinah's here. And Dinah thinks it'll be over quickly. And I mean, this manufactured crisis will be over quickly. Let's hope, but it will be the excuse that our governments will be using to explain rising prices. They'll be blaming it on the Russians. What don't I understand about the Europeans? I'm reading from, well, European interpretations of the history. So I'm saying that European nations do not have leaders that protect their national interest. I don't think I'm being controversial in saying this. I'm sure even before this manufactured crisis, plenty of European citizens of European nations do not feel that their government is acting in their national interest. Ralph is addicted to my streaming. Let's have a look at what China is saying. I'll probably have to go soon. Yeah, I think I should stream while I am thinking, because I'm giving you my freshest, newest thoughts, and I'm prepared to make predictions. There's a report from the BBC saying why China matters in the Ukraine conflict. So it trades with both Kiev and Moscow. So let's see what propagandists want us to think. If you don't think my commentary is good enough, you can always go to Black Pigeon Speaks Felix Rex, who is live at the moment. Oh, I'm not going to listen to this because it's just a video of Xi Jinping speaking. I know that the Chinese ambassador has tweeted. Xiaoming, I think. But yeah, my prediction is that our government is going to blame Russia for everything that goes wrong in our country. It's like, blame the Russians. It's all the Russians doing this to you. So 6 hours ago, this is what China says. Taiwan is not Ukraine. Taiwan has always been an inalienable part of China's territory. This is an indisputable historical legal fact. The One China principle is a universally recognized norm governing international relations. Taiwan region's peace hinges on peaceful development across strait relations rather than fawning on foreign forces for arms sales and military support. Taiwan independence only leads to a dead end. No one shall have any illusion or make any miscalculation on this issue, and you had better not. So the most interesting immediate tweets would be from the Chinese ambassador, and then quite a lot of Chinese tweets. The one before that, he talks about Fukushima. I don't know why. I know he tweeted some more stuff about 10 hours ago, he said, the current situation in Ukraine is a result of various factors and has much to do with the long delay in the implementation of the Minsk II agreement. We hope relevant sides exercise restraint, de-escalate the situation through dialogue and consultation, and avoid further escalation. No such luck, huh? And 16 hours ago, he said, we believe the door to a peaceful settlement of the Ukraine issue is not completely shut. We hope relevant parties can stay cool-headed and rational and commit themselves to a peaceful resolution through negotiation in accordance with the purposes and principles of UN Charter. And he also said China will continue to promote peace talks in its own way. We welcome and encourage all efforts dedicated to advancing diplomatic settlement of the issue. You can read between the lines about China's disapproval of the hysterical brinksmanship of the Western nations, or rather, America and its vassal states. And before that, 16 hours ago, he says, China always upholds objectivity and fairness, stands for peace and justice, and decides its position based on the merits of the matter concerned. We believe all countries should settle international disputes in a peaceful way in accordance with the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. And before that, those who accuse China of violating the principle of respecting state sovereignty and territorial integrity on the Ukraine issue either harbor ulterior motives or are misguided by misrepresentation. So, yeah, it's saying, well, don't listen to Western propaganda. And on the 23rd, still yesterday, Chinese ambassador to London tweets, in his phone call with Blinken, Wang Yi said China is monitoring the Ukraine situation closely and emphasized China's consistent position on the issue. The legitimate security concerns of any country must be respected, i.e. Russia's, and the purpose of principles of UN Charter must be upheld. What has happened on the Ukraine issue has much to do with the long delay in the effective implementation of the Minsk II agreement. China will continue to engage all parties according to the merits of the matter itself. The situation in Ukraine is deteriorating. So China's position is stop fighting, stop being silly, stop being hysterical. Oh, and before that, it was about hoping the Queen recovers from COVID, so we can stop there. Yes, Amanda, Russia did move quickly, but you'd expect them to because they've been expecting trouble for years. What do you mean, Evelyn, for you that Russia wants to advance its territory? I mean, I suppose the Russians probably think we're just taking back territory that used to belong to us for our security needs because we've been encircled by NATO, and who can deny that? So I guess the other thing would be the Minsk Agreement, which I might be a bit vague about. Minsk Agreement. And about. Okay, there have been two. Minsk agreements were a series of international agreements which sought to end a war in the Donbass region of Ukraine. The first agreement, known as the Minsk Protocol, was drafted in 2014 by the Trilateral Contact Group on Ukraine. So it consists of the Russian Federation, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, with mediation by leaders of France and Germany in the so-called Normandy format. So that's when. So it was over the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic and Lugansk People's Republic, and it wasn't recognized then, and it was only recognized, 2 days ago, on the 22nd of February. The agreement, which followed multiple previous attempts to stop fighting in the Donbass prior to the 2022 invasion by Russia, aimed to implement an immediate ceasefire. It failed to stop fighting and was followed with a revised and updated agreement commonly called Minsk II, which was signed on 12 February 2015, but also failed, with Russia recognizing separatist regions on 22nd February 2022 prior to declaring war on Ukraine and invading it on 24th February 2022. So that's how Wikipedia put it. Did it declare war? Let's have a look at that entry. It links to the Independent. I'm sure that will be revised. You know what kind of paper the Independent is. We can have a look at RT. Oh, I've got to go. Bye.